you can go it. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I know it's very difficult. Everyone finished his job, and most of you are like in Australia. And thank you so much for attending this meetup. And thank you, Bob, for the opportunity to come to present a subject which is like really interesting. Okay, we're gonna start by presenting our group meetup group. Our meetup group Agile Manager is which our mindset. We're gonna present our mindset. The subject today is a very interesting and agile coach guide to showing your value. Presenting by the most badass agile coach, Bob Garden. Thank you. And our meetup group our mindset is like we have a group with we want to bring like the hot topic in agile. We invite the agile top voice to present the topic. We want to learn from you. We want to share ideas, and the ideas, the rule is, if you are not speaking in the meetup, please mute yourself. And we manage a waiting room for the people who are late. And if you want to ask a question, just raise your hands, and we're gonna take your question. I'm gonna ask you to write your name, your country, just to very interesting. Someone could just mute his mic, please.
I did, Oscar.
Okay. Agile group, it's we are like we have like 4 or 5 years in here in Canada. We are one of the largest group in terms of members. We are 2,005 members. It's our vision is like to be a leading resource for agile management. We invite top agile top leader in coaching, Scrum, management 3.0, and many subjects. So we have a YouTube channel. You can follow us, okay? And the organizer, it's me, Oscar. I am an agile coach now. Right now, I am a senior director in a CGI in Montreal. Present yourself, Marie-Hélène.
Hello, everyone. I'm really passionate about coaching and agile and management as well. So that's why I want to share my passion with you.
Great. We have another one, Karina. She's not here. She's like an agile coach. Most of you know her on LinkedIn. She's like an expert in the professional coaching. And now today we have extraordinary badass coach, Bob Garden. Welcome, Bob. Bob is one of our top voice in agile coaching. He's author, speaker. You know him in many communities. Bob, I think you can do your presentation by yourself better than me. I'll let you just introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Oscar. If you could stop sharing, I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
And just the thing I think we needed to mention is that Bob has only one laptop, so he's not able to see the chat. So we will monitor the.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. So the topic is, I get torn by what to say a coach's guide to what. Is it communicating your value? Is it showing your value? The term I'm thinking about tonight is, or today, is confirming your value. But I may change my mind in a little bit, so we'll see. The challenge, I think showing, measuring, confirming, communicating your value as an agile coach, it's one of the greatest mysteries and one of the greatest challenges that I've had in my career doing it. Everyone seems to ask me, what do you do as an agile coach? What value are you bringing to the organization? Another question that comes up is, how do I measure that value? And I'm sure all of you resonate with that. I'm sure you get that question either once a month, once a year, maybe once a day. And I'm going to give you some ideas around how to handle it. But certainly I'm not going to be presumptuous, even though I'm a badass, and I'm really not a badass. But even though I'm a badass, I'm not going to presume that I don't know everything. But hopefully I give you some ideas of how to show your value, how to confirm your value. So you're in the eye of the hurricane. A metaphor I'd like you to, sort of get in your head as you're in the eye of the hurricane. And there's a lot of challenges. So there's no easy answers. There's just ideas, approaches, and patterns. So that's where I want to go to that. One of the things I want you to think about with value is, I think one of the best opportunities to establish your value landscape as a coach is in the very beginning of your coaching. And I think a lot of coaches miss that opportunity. And some people will say, oh, if you're an outside coach, you have an opportunity to do contract negotiation. But I'm an internal coach. And I actually think both coaches, any coach has the opportunity to establish their agenda with their client. They have the opportunity to establish goals and things like that. So I really want to encourage all of you to have value-based discussions before you start coaching. It's actually never too late to say, stop, hold it. We never talked about how to determine value. So why don't we do it now? So if you missed it in the beginning, I think you can always catch it up. And then one of the things about in the beginning, right after that, is co-create it. I have this thought that you should never be independently measured as a coach. I know people want to try to do it, and you could acquiesce to that, but I always am trying to co-create the value proposition. So if a stakeholder comes to me and says, how do I measure your impact? I'm like, fantastic question. How do I measure your impact? And how do we measure our impact together? Because I'm working with you as a coach. It's really not so much of an independent role. So if we can move to that co-creation process, that co-ownership process, I think that's very effective. That can be more effective in the beginning, when you're negotiating, when you're setting the agenda, before you enter into it, starting to coach teams. And don't be afraid to say no. And what I mean by that is, if I talk to Anne-Marie and I say, Anne-Marie, I want you to coach 25 Agile teams starting tomorrow, and you have 2 weeks to make them be Agile and create high performance teams. I hope that Anne-Marie would have the courage and the wherewithal to say, well, Bob, that's a really interesting idea. Why do you want to do that? Let me understand. But you know what? I can't do that. But here's maybe what I can do. And better yet, here's what we can do together to coach those teams to meet your goals, or not all of those teams. And managing expectations. Everyone understand what I'm saying? Like, it's not just, it's setting the landscape, and it's managing expectations from the very beginning. So think about that, and maybe not be shy about that. Someone, I hear someone off mute. So if everyone could mute themselves, please be active on your mutes. Okay. So I want to bring in the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel, and I want to leverage it in part of these discussions. The Agile Coaching Growth Wheel is a framework for coaching, for Agile coaching. It's similar to the Agile Coaching Competency Framework, or the X-Wing model, if you're familiar with that. The Growth Wheel extends it in some areas. I just like it as a metaphor for this discussion, for you to keep it in the back of your mind. That when you're communicating value, it's from what position? It's from the position of being an Agile coach. And what do they do? I actually think you can leverage the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel as an introduction with your clients. Does everyone know what I mean by client in this sense? The client is anyone you're coaching. So it could be a Scrum team, a Kanban team. It could be an individual. It could be a leader. It could be a PMO. It could be a group of people. Every one of those, to me, could be your clients that you're coaching. Could be other coaches. Lord knows coaches need coaches. So it could be, you could be coaching other coaches. But establish that baseline of what is Agile coaches. I think part of the value disconnect is that people are measuring us Agile coach impact and they don't know what Agile coaching is. Does that resonate with anyone? I'd love to get some some thumbs up or something. Resonates. Part of that introduction is to explain what it is and what it isn't. And the growth wheel can be really a wonderful framework, a wonderful conversation device to do that. So your first coaching stance with the client is teaching about Agile coaching. Everyone with me? So you're teaching about Agile coaching. So that could be your first stance. Again, that beginning is really, I think, important to get to. Now I want to switch gears. I wanted to set the landscape a little bit, everyone. And what I want to do now is when I was researching this, when I was motivated to think about value and showing our value and communicating our value and confirming our value, I looked out and I was looking for advice from other Agilists. And I found some perspectives on measuring value as an Agile coach. So from different individuals. So I thought I'd share that now. Consider it like we're going to do a little survey of Agile coaches. So I'm going to start in no particular order. Pierre Nice, I think it's maybe Nice, I think he's in France. He's a European coach. He talks about the 3 levels of measurement of an Agile coach. And he brings up ADKAR as sort of coaching through those phases. Think of that as phases of coaching or client maturation. And what Pierre is really talking about is team and organizational and individual coaching. And I think he's broadening the notion of you're not just getting value from teams as a team coach.
I have a question if you let me interrupt.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so it's from Sati, Australia. How would you define Agile coaching and what it means to an organization, to leaders who have assumptions based on their limited exposure?
That I mean is the point I was trying to make there. Okay. Anne-Marie, to that questioner is they have assumptions, so we need to replace those assumptions with reality as a coach. Remember, I was talking about a proper beginning. So think in terms of you're using the Agile coaching growth wheel, or if you have a 10-year-old or a 13-year-old child, and you're an Agile coach. Not that I'm comparing a 13-year-old child to a leader in an organization, but your 13-year-old child asks you, "What do you do?" And you say, "I'm an Agile coach." And they say, "Well, what is that? And what value do you bring?" Then the next question is, how do you unfold that? And I would unfold that bringing up a lightweight conversation around the Agile coaching growth wheel and talking about the role of a coach, what a coach does, what they don't do, talking about different stances. Everyone with me? Talking about dancing around the stances, talking about meeting the client's agenda and things like that. So that's what I think one of our jobs in order to establish a proper beginning, again, it's your choice. You can dive in and they don't know what you're doing. But you might take the time to explain what solid Agile coaching looks like from your perspective. And I would recommend using the growth wheel for that. Okay? And again, food for thought, everyone. Remember, I'm a badass, but not all the time. So I'm just giving you some ideas and your mileage will vary. So Pierre the thing that I wanted to bring up about Pierre that's interesting is he's not giving us credit just to be a team coach. Everyone with me? So here's a point. Very often a Scrum Master is looked at as a team coach, or there's team-centric coaches. I would say that's not good enough or Pierre would say that's not good enough. You need to look at your exposure from an organizational perspective, and you need to look at your impact from an individual perspective. What he's saying is don't get stuck in one direction with one group. But I can hear Oscar saying, "But Bob, what if I get paid as a team coach?" That's fantastic, Oscar. But what I want you to do is sort of look at the landscape and occasionally look for organizational coaching opportunities or maybe a leader opportunity. maybe become more well-rounded. So Pierre is saying the more well-rounded we are, the more value we provide, is the way I'm interpreting that. Okay, everyone? So value proposition is well-roundedness. Len Lagusty is a coach, I think, on the West Coast of the US. And he talks about 8 ways to measure your impact as an Agile coach. And a few of these I like. So for example, this is how to measure yourself, how to know if you're doing a good job. Proud parent moments, if everyone can be empathetic to that, right? You have how many proud parent moments do you have per day, per week, per month, per year? Is there one, or is there more than one? Language changes. The organization stops talking about resources. I'm kidding. And they start talking about people. They don't refer to people as resources anymore. The shortest possible cycle time. Quality starts improving. The quality of the deliverable starts including. The ability to self-heal. Self-management, self-healing. If someone leaves a team, the team coheses around that. Of the coaching tree, Len talks about, are the coaches developing the coaches behind them? So the organization is not getting dependent on Bob Galen. Like, one of my jobs as a coach, and according to Len, would be to replace myself or to mentor coaches around me. Am I providing impact by doing things like that? Everyone with me? He has an interesting set of things to think about. This is you measuring your own value and observing it. And you could share these with your client as well. Jesse Fuel, a lot of people know him. He wrote this, How to Measure Effective Agile Coaching, for the Scrum Alliance. And I respect Jesse. Jesse's a wonderful thinker. And he has a different perspective. All of these are different perspectives. So everyone remember, I'm not telling you, don't take one, just consider all of these 8 approaches and then maybe put together your own view to how to measure impact and how to measure value and how to confirm value. Jesse says, don't measure coaches by organizational results and don't measure coaches by coaching activity. And I love that. Right? What he says is instead measure the coaches by leader and team satisfaction scores, using some sort of net promoter score, and give them an exam or have a survey. So survey your clients in a broad way and have them determine your value proposition, both numerically and anecdotally. What impact are you making to their lives? And he talks a lot about it's not just quantitative. So many coaches are looking for numeric, quantitative measures. There's nothing wrong with that. But I actually think the qualitative value proposition, what people think of me as a coach, how I make them feel, do they feel that I'm competent? Am I meeting them where they are? That matters as much as the quantitative values, like how many teams I can coach at one time. So I can coach 25 teams at a time. So therefore, maybe I have value. I'm kidding, everyone. So Jesse has some interesting. Ask your customers. Ask your customers what's going on in your coaching. Ask your clients. Todd Langford, he talks about measuring the value of Agile coaching. And I think of this as more as a profession. So 5 outcomes to strive for as a coach. These are things to think about. So it's not just outward measurement. How are you measuring yourself as a coach? What are your goals? The client's goals matter. Of course they matter. But what are your personal goals? How are you measuring your personal performance? When you go home at night, you have client side feedback. What about personal side feedback? So he talks about helping you to see waste, coaching towards a bias for action. Are you giving teams and your organization a starter kit? Are you helping relearn how to learn? Are you preparing for a no Agile coach? It goes back to the point that Len was making with coaching tree. Are we? Sometimes some people use the phrase one of the Scrum Masters' jobs is to put themselves out of work. I don't know if I really like that phrase, but there's a point behind it. The point is I'm serving the team, and it's not about me. I'm growing the team, and at some point they will need me less and less. And I think the coaching has that should have that same aspiration. So that's one of the points that Todd is making. Focus on coaching outcomes versus coaching output. So Todd talks about more having that outcome focus that you've all heard about from an organizational perspective. Neil McShane has performance metrics for Agile coaches. So the question is, are you performing? Again, all of these are food for thought. All of you can aggregate these and come up with your own performance metrics, if you will. Neil talks about jobs that get done, client experience, which aligns with what Jesse was saying, I think, community contribution. So Neil brings in this point of, are you outwardly contributing to the Agile community in some way? And then, are you practicing, having a growth mindset? So are you walking your talk? Which is one of my favorite sort of metrics for an Agile coach. Are we modeling? It's one of the reasons I like the growth wheel. Are we walking our talk? Are we modeling? Are we practicing what we preach? Forget practicing what we preach. Are we practicing? Are we continuously practicing to get better? It's that sort of that alignment with martial arts. I'm not very athletic, but I did do karate for a few years, and you're never done. You're not, the goal is not to be done. You're continuously learning. You're continuously practicing. I used to love practicing katas. Not love, but it was interesting to practice and perfecting yourself. The art of practicing, getting, sort of incrementally better. Gene Gendel has he has a top 10 objectives for Agile coaches, different words. And I love it. He talks about Gene is a LESS coach, LESS, large scale Scrum. And so you see some of LESS principles in this list. And I think that's a positive thing. He talks about moving from a Lulu color perspective. Are you moving the tribal stages of the organization? Are you moving from silos to transparency? So a lot of what Gene is talking about, even if you were a team coach, Gene is saying, think organizationally, think systemically, and systemic coaching, systemic evolution matters. And descaling. The other thing that he's emphasizing is simplicity. From a teaming point of view, are you aligning simply from a teaming point of view, from a descaling, from a decoupling point of view? Finally, my 8, I picked Roger Brown. He's the most experienced. He's a Scrum, a CEC emeritus at the Scrum Alliance. I met Roger many years ago. He's one of the first sort of really senior coaches that mentored me a little bit. He talks about value areas or reasons to hire an Agile coach in a transformation. So value from the hiring decision point of view, different lens. Every one of these folks has a different lens on value. Deep knowledge, broad experience, impartial perspective, access to resources, coaching competencies, and then reinforcing learning. So it's not just the books. So reading badass Agile coaching is not just, oh, I read Bob Galen's book. It's not good. It's not good enough. Or reading Lisa Atkins' book is not good enough. Or having 52 letters after your name is not good enough. It's this continuous, broad and deep practice. And I would say passion. If you remember Anne Marie, do you remember how passionate she was in the very beginning when she introduced herself? I thought my screen was going to shake out of her excitement in talking, but it's that it was palpable. And we, as coaches, are we bringing that level of energy, that level of excitement about what we do? Even though it's a hard profession, I would argue we should be bringing it every day, virtually or in person. My slide, this is my slide on value, is I have value equals retention equivalency. I'm going to try to explain what that is. Has anyone worked in an organization? Well, I've done this. I've been a senior leader in organizations, and there's value roles and there's overhead roles. And so value roles, when we're talking about value in an organization, like doing layoffs or doing workforce reductions or hiring, we're going to hire 50 people. What types of people are we going to hire? So in most companies, developers have an inherent value. Does everyone understand what I mean? But leaders, executives, oh, developers produce products, they write code, they have value. Some testers, not all automated testers, DevOps engineers, they have value. Some UX engineers. Then there are some roles that leaders struggle with. They sometimes use the term overhead. Anyone ever hear that term? They're overhead people. Project managers are often looked at as overhead. In organizations, managers are looked at. Very often, some managers are looked at as overhead. Sometimes you think managers is a great place to be. It's not always a great place to be. And I have some really bad news for everyone. A lot of agile roles, I think organizations define them as overhead. That doesn't mean overhead roles are not valued. They're just not valued in the same way that these historical roles, the development roles are. And when I say value equals retention equivalency, what I'm saying is as Agilists, we need to cross that chasm. Everyone with me? We need to cross that chasm from overhead to what? To value added. Because we need to get out of overhead. So if you're in those latter roles, it's important to find your value outcomes that generate equivalency to the producers. Somehow, how do you measure that? That you would say, a leader, a CTO would say, I'm not going to lay off the coaches. They're providing the same value that the developers do. So if I have to reduce staff, if I'm going to reduce 2 developers, I'm going to reduce 2 coaches. It's going to be equivalent because they both are providing fantastic value to this organization. Different value, but fantastic value. It's value equivalency. That's our mindset. And it's a bit of a chasm that we have to cross. We have to cross that, whether you like it or not. When I started this talk, Capital One had some layoffs in Virginia, and there was some challenges in our community with workforce reductions and layoff. And I'm not saying that value is the only reason, but I think it's one of the major reasons. We haven't crossed that chasm. We haven't confirmed our value. And I'm going to talk about some ways to do that. But now I see quite a few companies are doing layoffs. It's disappointing to me. And the companies are myopic and they're not appreciating value. But I would argue that we as Agilists are not doing enough to confirm our value. We're not doing enough to cross the chasm. I might even say we might have gotten lazy or complacent, and we need to do a better job of crossing that chasm. So my personal advice for value is remember that up front, be very clear about that upfront navigation. Share your coaching ethics. Another thing that's really important is up front, talk about your ethics, talk about coaching ethics and your principles and your guidelines. Establish a clear understanding of why and the business desired outcomes. Why are you being engaged? Right? Look at it through the eyes of your stakeholder, of your leader, and do a deep dive, not a superficial why, but what are the outcomes? And then co-create an agenda, focus, and a measurement system together. Right? We're in this together. That share these OKRs together. Focus on outcomes over output, partnering and co-creation. Never ever go it alone. I think it's really dangerous to be a coach that's out there coaching a team by yourself, going it alone, communicating by your value by yourself, right? Reporting on Jira. Well, what's your value proposition? Well, go look at Jira to see what the team, that's not good enough from my point of view. So couple with your other coaches, couple with the teams, but really differentiate yourself. Measure team and organizational outcomes over individuals. And the one metrics that matter, am I adding self-evident value equivalent to the producers? Remember that crossing the chasm? And the only way you're going to get this is talk to the people that are measuring. So don't give them measures. Talk to your stakeholders. Become empathetic with your stakeholders. Do deep dives with what keeps them up at night. What is the why? How do I delight you? What are you looking for me to do? Meet your stakeholders where they are. Don't meet them where you want them to be on the Agile continuum. Meet them where they are. And then show that value and then move.
Bob, before you continue, there is some question here.
Okay, this is a great place to pause. Go ahead.
I have Sakti from Australia. You want to ask the question by yourself, Sakti? Bob, what are some patterns you have noticed in your experience?
Yeah,
Whereby
I can ask.
Okay, go.
Yeah. Bob, what I wanted, because you have gone through this continuum quite a bit, and for you to raise this as a principle, what are the evidences you have seen where the flick of the switch happened, where people realize that you are a producer rather than an overhead? Like, when have you seen that happen as a pattern?
I think it's less we're trying to measure. It's more I would measure behaviors. So I recently wrote a blog post that I was talking about as coaches coaching leaders, how would you measure your effectiveness? And we could give you a link to that, but some of the measures were, how often are you as a coach invited into organizational strategic meetings with the leadership team? How often are you invited into organizational restructuring sessions? How often are you given a seat at the table when talking about workforce reductions? It's an example. So what I'm saying is the behavior. How do you measure it? That it's how do you become a trusted partner is another way of saying cross that chasm, if that makes sense. And so how do I measure whether I'm a trusted partner? How often are you being asked for your advice? Rather than you telling people, I want to make Oscar agile, right? All right. I'm going to coach you, Oscar, until you're agile, whatever that means. Oscar's behavior is pulling me in. So instead of me pushing, maybe that's a succinct way to say it. When you start getting pulled in, I think you started crossing that chasm, if that helps.
Oh, more than helps. Thank you.
Right. And if you're not being pulled in, that's a problem. Right. that's what. So if you're not being pulled in to the rooms or whatever, at whatever level, then, and even if people, so let me continue with the slides, but yeah, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
So I actually have this, I've given this talk a few times, and it was funny. I gave it to a small group of coaches, and I very early on, and I presented this slide, and you would have thought that I was the devil incarnate or something when I mentioned this to this room of coaches, great coaches, and I said, stop being so humble and so servant oriented. And it was like, what are you saying, Bob? I mean, this is against our Agile principles. We're, as coaches, we serve the team, we serve the client, our values, our ethics. And I'm like, of course that's true. But I'm wondering if we're too humble. I'm wondering if we're too servant oriented and we've forgotten to serve another person, ourselves, which then if we're not serving ourselves, maybe we will not have any clients to serve. I really said it. I think you have to become comfortable as an Agile coach and adept at blowing your own horn. I want everyone to yell that. Don't commute, but I want you to blow your own horn a little bit. Wherever you're at, even if you have children around you, I am a great coach. I am providing value. I did this. Don't say my team did this. Don't say the organization. Me. Make your personal contributions visible through your team and the organization. Get more comfortable talking about yourself. Yes, your work and your impact. if you're coaching a team, that's fine. Put the team out front, but also the team is making improvements based on your coaching. Take some credit for that.
Bob,
Create
a question from Leslie. Leslie, would you like to take the mic?
Oh, hey, Bob.
Hi, Leslie.
So my comment was just, I think that that's great advice if your personality is humbleness to begin with. But I run into far too many consultative coaches who feel like their whole job is to sell themselves to everyone up and down the line, and it takes all of the air out of the room, and it's tiring.
And I get that, Leslie, but if you're letting that air, then if I'm not hearing your voice and your value, right, then that's a problem. That's yes.
Yeah, but I think there needs to be balance, right? You need to know your personality and know if you need to amplify or dial it back.
Well, I would also say, in general, I don't know if everyone is comfortable blowing their own horn, even the folks you're exaggerating. So all I'm getting at is we need to be blowing our own horn. And there may be 10% of the population that needs to shut up a little more. And that could be a conversation we have with them as we elbow them, right? So, but again, and create that marketing in the brand. Create that marketing in the brand. I see so many coaches, well, we'll let some of these, I think I have some of this ideas on the slides, but it's a great point. It's a great point, but don't let that take all the oxygen out, okay? This is really important stuff. So
I just want to know, yeah,
go ahead.
Now, is there a lot, because people are starting asking questions, just wanted to know where you're at.
I just want to go through this slide and then we'll take a few more questions.
Woohoo! Thank you.
All right. So stop being so humble. And then I want, Leslie, I want this notion of being your advocate. I want you to be your own advocate. So I see a lot of coaches that think the data speaks for itself. Look at JIRA. No, the data does not speak for itself. The data is the data. It's wonderful. And then your team doesn't speak for you. There's a genre of coaches. Oh, my team speaks for me. My team of coaches, my Scrum team. No. And then a lot of coaches, when I was talking to people at Capital One, a few people, they were like, well, my boss loves me. And my boss speaks for myself. My boss is advocating my value. The head coach, the head of the transformation. That's great. No, you speak for yourself. Don't expect someone else to do it for you. That's fine if they're doing it. Advocate for yourself. Make sure you understand your brand. You create your brand. You create an identity. You communicate that identity. I want to channel Leslie a little bit. Yes, there's a fine line. You don't want to become an ass, right? So you want to be a badass, not just an ass. So you don't want to over communicate that, but you don't want to under communicate it. So stop being so humble, become an advocate, blow your own horn. It's incredibly important. All right, let's take a few questions.
We have some question here. There is Uma. Then someone on the team might have to own neutrality, optimizing practice flow, culture mindset, etc. Blah, and otherwise status quo might set in. Uma, could you just you can also ask your question by yourself? It's better.
All right, I'm looking at the chat because I chatted quite a bit, so I'm seeing where.
Yeah, there's a question you asked. Then someone on the team might have to own neutrality, optimizing practice for.
Yeah. So I this was more so like a response to some of the comment about Ted Lasso and other sports coaches, who kind of thought the team would self-organize. So I just added my thoughts there, saying that if that would happen, I mean, the team still needs somebody to kind of help with continuous improvement or having that neutrality and that view to continuously, help the team grow. Because there's not a stopping point. We say, okay, now we're all like grown up, or, we're matured, that then it becomes status quo. But it was more like sharing of thoughts. But I want to hear about those coaches firing or just quitting because the team could, and then what happened to the team after that?
Is there another question?
There's another question about Clayton Red. Would you have any example of this type of survey?
This type of survey?
Yeah, it was like you were like presenting one slide, and you ask question. Clayton, if you are online, you can also just ask your question. Okay, no one's here. We can go to another.
The NPS
All right,
survey, Bob.
All right, go ahead.
There.
I mean, do I have an example of the NPS that Jesse Fuel?
Yeah.
No, I don't think Jesse. I don't know if he published it. There's an article link there. You can look. I think what Jesse's recommending is you tailor it. So I have another bit of bad news for a lot of coaches that may be listening. A lot of coaches are looking for the magic rubric that says, if I measure these 3 things or these 5 things in my context, then it'll tell me if I'm doing great work or not great work, or if I'm being valued or not valued. I think what Jesse's saying is it's situational, and you need to do the heavy lifting as a coach to make sure that you're getting behavioral metrics, you're getting pulled into the conversations, you're blowing your own horn enough. So there might be some models, but my recommendation to everyone is you need to come up with your own value-based rubric on your context, talking to your stakeholders. Don't get late. I think it's lazy to say, oh, give me the metric, give me the survey, and then just send it out there. It's not going to land. Every leader, every value proposition is going to be unique. You need to connect to those stakeholders, find out what's important to them, get some advice, and then start moving across that chasm. So I think you're going to have to do, this is ideas, but you're going to have to do some of that heavy lifting yourself. And I would lean you away from a survey, and I would lean you more into conversation. Does that resonate with everyone? Like face-to-face, I've heard this somewhere in the Agile community, less instrumented feedback and more face-to-face communication with your stakeholders to try to find what they value, to create relationships, and then deliver to that. But some of these are valid ideas. I mean, they're valid ideas to start with, but you want to validate your impact, and you want to get close to your stakeholders to understand it. I think that was an important point that Jesse was making.
Yeah, and I think Katie McDonald had a question. Katie, are you?
Yeah, it's Katie. Yeah, no problem. So,
Katie,
Bob,
I'm sorry.
yeah, no problem. Bob, I was wondering how you might recommend working with an organization that's very output measurement focused, like they measure their teams from output perspective, their products from output perspective, and you're coming in as a coach trying to move them towards outcome-based thinking. It's challenging to ask them to measure you in a way that's different than how they measure everything else in the organization. So any advice on helping them make that shift kind of universally in their mindset around measurement?
I think one of the keys, Katie, is going back to what I was saying, partnership. And I know this isn't easy, but on entry, that partnership, that co-creation, starting to make the case that you're not going to measure me, you're going to measure us. And then working with them individually to shift, to really understand what is driving the goal. So if the culture is output driven, start creating some relationships with those individual leaders and start understanding why. What is the why behind that? And start building a relationship so you can run experiments to then meet their goals, to meet their measurements by moving to outcome. And not doing that in mass, but doing that in smaller pockets. I think as a coach, building that relationship, you know what I mean? Understanding their why, building empathy. There's this notion of meeting people where they are. So I'm going to say something weird. Don't coach them on outcome. Meet them in output. Meet them deeply in output. Understand, meet them where they are. And I don't mean artificially meet them. I'll understand that for 10 minutes. Now let me show you this outcome based metrics book by Daniel Picante. You're not really getting into their world. Jump into their world, understand their why, the driving, and then leverage your coaching experience to move them forward experientially, right? You're partnering with them. And I'm not saying you're not doing what I was just saying. It sounded maybe judgmental. I didn't mean it that way.
Bob, we kind of changing our mindset over here in this organization where we got away from this fix it kind of approach and start having a deep conversation to help shape what the real problems that a team or a group is having.
And that's where value starts. And then how are we moving this together?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's that, it's not so much, it's that intangible measure of how it's really that collaborative movement, that cultural movement, that behavioral movement.
Mm-hmm. We get them to commit to their own problems, instead of looking to the coaches to solve it,
Well, but let's be clear, and I'm with you, but that's co-create. We can play an incredibly active and vibrant and successful part of working with it. So it's the partnership.
Sure.
Right.
And that partnership is built on this engagement model that we work with the team, but we also couple that with clear OKRs where we agree on key results in terms of what do you really expect. Now, some people don't like using OKRs, but I think it's very useful, especially when you have dysfunctional situations that, let's start. I try to shift it so they kind of own that OKR and we're just kind of the critical piece of their success and then show that result and say, now, what do you guys think? Are we going in the right direction? Can we do better? Let them own that continuous thinking in terms, we can do better. That learning and growing together kind of a situation.
All right. I'm going to start up with a few more slides, but I love the questions and then we'll come back. The point of this is I think as a value proposition or a behavior or a tactical proposition, there's a lot of coaches that I encounter, even experienced coaches, they find a stance that's their favorite stance and they don't switch it. So I would call them one stance ponies. I'm kidding. Or two stance ponies. And they never met a client where they couldn't ask powerful questions. Or again, I'm being playful because it's in the evening. What I'm really trying to say is I think our value as coaches, we want to become more well-rounded. So our value to the organization is if you're just sticking in professional coaching mode, I think you may want to become more dexterous and you may want to be sort of moving around depending on the situation, depending on your role as a coach, be developing that well-roundedness. You saw that in some of the measures, the practice-oriented nature or the the continuous growth and the continuous learning. And I'm just amplifying that. And the wheel is a wonderful tool or a wonderful framework, a wonderful metaphor for developing your growth plan. All of you should be having a growth plan that you're driving and you're aligning it with the value proposition of your current role in the organization. Another idea is to increase your visibility. Stop coaching from the back of the room. Coach from the front of the room. Volunteer for things. I've talked to coaches who a leadership team is looking for an offsite facilitation. Everyone with me? The C-level team is going offsite, and no one in the coaching team sort of volunteers to help with that. I'm like, my gosh, that's a wonderful opportunity to help a leadership team. And they're like, but it's not an Agile meeting. It's sort of a strategy meeting. I'm like, I don't really care. Go in and help give them some secret sauce for Agile facilitation magic and chops. So, and get in front of the room. So look for all hands activities, celebrations, facilitate strategy sessions. I can't believe I said safe and multi-team events, but yes, share your domain experience, do lunch and learns. Get out there, Don't stand behind. Do webinars like this one. Do webinars. Look for increasing requests. And how do you know if it's getting better? How do you know if it's working? How do you know if your brand is building? If no one is asking you questions, then you need to do better. But if people are pulling you in, if someone sends you an email, I saw you. Why did you do that in that meeting? Why did you facilitate it that way? Now you know that you're generating the interest, you're building your brand, you're building your value proposition outside of being an Agile coach. So look for those opportunities and grab them. Don't thumb your nose at them. Don't trust superficial kudos. Anyone ever? There's a show on the Food Channel called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. And in Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, the Guy Fieri is the host, and he visits diners, drive-ins, and dives, and he critiques the food. And when he doesn't like, he's written about this. When he doesn't like the food, he will not, because it's on TV, he will not be overly negative. He'll just, his keywords are, oh, that's good. Oh, that tastes fine. Oh, great job. That's his keywords for it's me. I don't like it. He's given mid-level feedback. And that's his shtick. When he really loves something, he's enthusiastic. So what you want, when a lot of times coaches are like, I like Katie McDonald, great coach, wonderful coach. Great sense of humor. I'm like, give me more. What? Let's be specific. What coaching stand? Dive into that, right? Talk to me about Katie's courageousness. Talk to me about her walking her talk. Talk to me about OKRs. What's Katie doing to the bottom line? And if I can't we need to dig deeper. So as a coach, dig deeper into those kudos. And if you don't find anything, you need to fill that up with things. It doesn't mean totally be honest or speaking truth. It's nice cultures. Anyone ever work in a nice culture? It's sometimes everything is nice. So that all comes into play. But great job. I love what you're doing. Agile rocks. We couldn't do it without you. Dig deeper. And if you don't find much, you need to do more on the brand building side. You need to do more on the value communication side so that people have those stories to tell. That's part of blowing your horn. Part of blowing your horn is moving beyond those generic kudos. I want everyone to close their eyes. Close your eyes. Just because I'm going to take my hat off and I don't have any hair, so I just wanted to scratch my head. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So I want you. Jeff Bezos says that keep your eyes closed. Branding is what people say about you when you're not in the room. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to honestly ask yourself, what do people in your organization say about you when you're not in the room? Guess. Think about that for 30 seconds.
We have some interesting question here, Bob.
Just wait.
Sorry.
Wait.
Yeah,
Now, my question to everyone, open your eyes. Is that what you want them? Is that what you want them to be saying? And if it's not, you can change that. You can reframe your brand. You need to be brand aware. You each have a brand. Let me give you some advice. You don't want to be branded as a good Agile coach. You don't want to be branded as a good Agile team coach. You want more nuance than that. I don't want to be branded as an old guy with a white beard who does presentations. I want more nuance than that. So try to work on that. All right, I'll take some questions.
White beard that looked like Jerry Garcia.
Yeah. or would like to look like Jerry Garcia. I'm sorry I cut you off, Oscar. Go ahead. Give me some questions.
No problem. There is Oluf Nissen. You have an interesting question to share. You can go.
Yeah, so it's predicated on the idea that what we do is rooted in the complex domain of the Cynefin framework, where it's not always clear what the link is between cause and effect. So what would you say about what could we do to make the link between cause and effect in what we do clearer?
I don't know, Olaf. That's a challenge for you. I understand and buy exactly what you're saying. I'm going to ask you right back. What do you think in your context? Give me an example. Just blurt out. What can you do? What could you do to connect the dots to your value proposition?
I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I haven't come up with a good answer yet. So I will keep thinking about it.
So we need to think about it, and I'm not just deflecting. I think each of us, and in our context, not just in the universal Cynefin context, but in the context of Cynefin at an organization where you're working with human beings, right? With the stakeholders, because that value is organizational value, right? To other humans. So what is that conversation and connecting the dots? I might start with having that exact conversation with those stakeholders. We're in a complex domain. I might give them a Cynefin 101 if they need it, and then I would start saying, so it's a little bit nuanced, but how do I demonstrate value to you and to the organization? How do I deliver a value? How do we measure that value? Forget value. How do I blow your socks off? How do I communicate and deliver to you that I have incredible value to this organization in our journey forward?
Right.
And
what I'm hearing is it's really about that initial, or maybe the re-partnering conversation, where you agree early on about what is the value that you're looking for, and
absolutely
how could I demonstrate that I'm providing that value? Yeah,
absolutely. And then again, it's not just to that stakeholder though. How are you emanating that value? When I talk about branding, how are you emanating that or blowing your own horn outside of that individual relationship, right? In meetings, in deliverable, in demonstrations or whatever. But it's not. It's what does so the CEO asked the question: what value does Olaf Nissen provide to this organization, right? And I don't know what that answer is today, but that's changed that narrative. That's enhanced that narrative over time. Another question?
Last one, Satki.
Yeah, this is a little political question. Bob, you talked about how value producers equal to retention, and what I've seen is as enterprise coaches, when we come in, we report to somebody who mostly might not be an agile expert, and you as an enterprise coach work with CX and the EGMs, and you start creating a big network. What I've seen as a pattern, at least in my experience, and I want to hear your thoughts, is once you actually start getting invited to these strategy sessions, the CX and the EGMs are calling on you and stuff, the people you report to start feeling that insecurity, and that starts breaking down multiple other things. And so it's almost like, as an enterprise coach, I need to keep them, the egos and their whatever in the right place, so that they feel I'm not taking over. So it's happened a couple of times. So keen to hear your thoughts on how do we go through the political conundrum of insecurities and other things that's in play, which might be hindrance to adding organizational value. I know it's a long question, but if it makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. I'm going to try to have a short answer. It depends, and it's situational, and you have to navigate that. But what I would caution you against is allowing the political dynamics to cause you to go silent. right? Because I think going silent, which is what I mean by going silent is doing the traditional thing of the team speaks for itself, my manager speaks for itself, the data speaks for itself, and you're not blowing your own horn at all. So there is a balancing act there. Someone mentioned earlier, well, what some people are obnoxiously talking about themselves. So that's an extreme. You don't want to become that. You don't want to become in that obnoxious extreme. But a lot of coaches are in that quiet extreme, the back of the room coaches. I'm an introvert, and it's really so. Sometimes personality traits become an impediment. For me, it's an impediment. I do not like blowing my own horn. It makes me feel cheap. It makes me feel like a snake oil salesman. But I've had to overcome that in order to navigate that. So I think there's no right or wrong answer, but I would say don't fall into the trap of too much or too little, and try to navigate those political dynamics, and don't allow the dynamics to silence. That's not the whole point of this talk is it's not a good it's not a good valuation strategy.
Yeah, and Bob, just adding one small thing is the slide which we are on. Branding is about what people say when you're not there, and sometimes that's the point I was making is when a good enterprise coach is not there, they talk highly of them, and people whom we report to feel that as an insecurity that you should be talking about me, not that.
Again, it's your brand and navigate it wisely, right? But if you're going to worry about what everyone's saying, then you're going to be on the periphery being silent. Is that it's your choice. Okay. So navigate that, but I'm navigating you away from the wall a little bit. All right, let's move on.
So Bob, one of those things we're trying to do is to drive awareness and adoption of our coaching kind of services that we want to provide.
Absolutely.
And not be thought of as a nice sweater to go into a closet because when things get kind of cold, and then put back in the closet when you're done. We wanted to be right up front and be seen as leaders. And oftentimes,
leaders, business partners.
Yeah.
Right. We want to be seen as value providers.
Yes.
Not less. I didn't say agile coach in any of that. I mean, yes, great coaches, that's fine. If we're going to talk about great coaching, then talk about what that is.
Yeah.
And make sure that we're actually delivering on that from an agile coaching growth wheel point of view, from a well-rounded point of view. But yeah, absolutely. Everyone, I want to be conscious of time. And we're only going to have, let's see, we're going to wrap up really quickly. I'm going to try to land it in 5 minutes and we'll do some more questions. So a part of value measurement is shifting conversations, everyone. I want you to think about yourself as a conversation shifter. So we want to move from, I want you to convert our teams to Agile Scrum. How should I measure your success? Okay. And I want you to shift that conversation of why do you want to move to Agile Scrum? What would be the indicators of that success? And let's co-create a strategy for both of us to get you there.
Right.
Okay. And you can fill in the language however you want. I just wanted to give you a flavor of the shifting we have to navigate, not just at the beginning, but in every conversation. My data team isn't performing. I need you to coach them to high performance. Anyone ever hear these move froms? Come on. I mean, I hear these all the time. What have you communicated so far to the data team? What does their high performance look like to you? And how can I help you get them there? If I hire you, you'll have to coach 20 teams and get them operating in an agile fashion in 3 months. First, I'm fairly sure I can't coach 20 teams at the same time. And it's unclear to me if 3 months is sufficient to meet your ambiguous agile fashion goal. Let's work on defining a strategy together. I'm being a little bit, right? But do you see the courage? We're not just serving coaching like we're serving hamburgers. There's a co-creation part to it. I don't see your teams improving quickly enough. Can I get you to commit to a 1-month program of improvement? No, you can't. But we can explore. And do you notice I didn't say yes and there, everyone? I did not say yes and. I specifically intentionally said no. but we can explore a plan where we work together to define the goals, etc. Those are just examples of moving from its conversation shifting, helping our stakeholders understand what we do and don't do, the role of the Agile coach. So I'm not going to do this. I was going to, if this was a longer presentation, we would actually break into breakout rooms and practice some conversations. What I've noticed though, in webinars like this is whenever you mention breakout room, half the people leave because they don't like breakout rooms. So we're not going to do breakout rooms, so no one leave. But in the slide deck, there's some examples. I want to suggest that you practice your conversations in a private dojo, maybe with some colleagues fashion. How do you get better at this? I would suggest you start if you have a coaching community of practice, or even this group could have a session where you break into rooms and we create some scenarios and we start practicing together and critiquing each other and getting better about how to strategically talk about coaching entry. And this slide would be coaching value conversations. And here's some more value conversations. So entry conversations and value-based conversations. And please, no JIRA. We're not bringing in data. We're having relationships-driven conversations. So there's some examples there to consider. And if you would find, you could even practice alone and say, how would I do this? And if you find that you're not doing a good job of communicating, maybe you need to practice that a little bit. So with all that being said, I'm just hoping to please aspire to become a more well-rounded coach and to be better at communicating and clarifying and confirming your value with your customers, with those clients. The world is getting harder. It's getting harder to, 10 years ago, I think coaches had inherent value, or Agile was new enough where no one was challenging our value. Maybe that's a better way to say it. 10 years ago, we got a free ride and we didn't get challenged enough on what our value proposition was. 15 years ago, 5 years ago. I think the world has changed and we're getting challenged to actually confirm our value. And so I'm trying to encourage all of you to look at that as a practice that we have to work on. And with that, I just want to thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much, Bob. And just for you mentioned that you can show your value if people are asking questions. I'm sure I ask everyone not to ask any other question, but I'm sure they will reach you to ask other questions as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for being there. Oscar, would you like to add something?
Just thank you, everyone, and thank you, Bob, for your great presentation. You are an amazing facilitator. We are really grateful to have you here, and see you for the next meetup. We are preparing something very interesting for you. And Bob, feel free to come back again because we love your presentation. We love you again. So good night, everyone, and see you in November or December.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
So
be
much.
careful. Be careful out there. Be careful. Show value. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Bob, you stay 1 minute after?
Absolutely. Olaf, thank you for your question.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you had so much material. Oh, it was amazing.
It's a really important topic that I'm still working on. It's getting more and more in my observation of the community. I think there's more and more, sort of negative events